Hello and welcome to Books in the World. I'm your host, Paul H. Bramer. Books in the World is an interview show produced by the Cape Cod Writers Center and the Cape Media Center. The Writers Center was established over 6 decades ago and sponsors a wonderful 4-day writers conference every summer here on Cape Cod. The goal of Books in the World is to show how writers, illustrators, publishers, editors, and others in the literary field play their role in the world of books and other communications media. This show has been broadcast continuously since 1978, making it the longest running program of its kind in the United States. Today we are delighted to welcome Jim Thomson, author of A Better Ending. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So now that we've done that, tell me a little bit about your background. You grew up in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Pittsburgh, born and raised in the area called the North Side, and never left the state of Pennsylvania until I was 17 years old. Wow. And I went off to college and then to the Navy during the Vietnam era. I was a navigator of a ship that sailed out of San Francisco to South China Sea, ports of Vietnam. I wound up getting a PhD in American Studies, taught for a very short period of time at the University of Miami in Florida. Went into business and with a very small company that did very, very well. And then I retired very young to become a writer. Not a successful writer, but a writer.
Success was built into that. Right?
Yeah, success, yeah. As I was telling you earlier, I went off camera, when I finally got my first book published at the age of 68, my wife said, "It's like you've been pregnant for 20 years.
And the name of that first book?
Lies You Wanted to Hear.
So when I was looking at your background, your PhD in American Studies, an interesting field on its own. Was that what led you into writing novels?
Well, not really.
I mean, it seems like a jump.
Yeah, I've always been interested in writing, but I used to make up titles, really great titles that Pulitzer Prize winners would kill for, but I didn't have any stories attached to them. And then I said one day, maybe I'm doing this wrong. And a friend of mine died in 1985 from AIDS, and we were very close, and I decided to write a short story as a tribute to him. I wrote it, nothing happened with it. I sent it off to a bunch of magazines, it got rejected. I put it in a drawer, but in 1988, a friend of mine invited me to join a workshop by the late Andre Dubus Jr. Not Andre Dubus that wrote House of Sand and Fog, but his father, who was just a wonderful short story writer. He had a workshop every Thursday night, and a friend of mine invited me to come. Andre asked me if I would come back and read the one short story I had written. And I was kind of thinking that when I read this story, one of two things were going to happen. Either people were going to say, "My God, Faulkner's glad he's dead because you're that good, and he's going to be jealous," or they would say, "It's a good thing you got a day job, buddy, because you ain't ever going to be a writer." And what they said after I finished the story was, "Not bad for a first try, write another one." And I realized, that's what writers do. They write. And I started writing then, very, very avidly at that point.
What was your thesis in your PhD?
My thesis was a wonderful subject. It was about Raymond Chandler,
the
the detective, hard-boiled detective novelist who created Philip Marlowe. That was fun. That was a very fun thing to write about.
Well, that must have whetted your appetite for writing
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Except I never really wanted to write mystery stories or detective stories. That I was more interested in writing whatever people call literary fiction.
Well, I would say, Jim, that this is sort of a detective story.
Yeah, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know this story was locked up in me until much, much later. Probably 15 years after I started writing.
Well, there's an awful lot of self-reveal in that book, especially things like the hazing incident early on. I mean, why did you work that stuff into the early parts?
I have this idea that if you're going to write a memoir, you might as well just throw it all out there. If you try to conceal too much, or if you lie, which would be horrible, make things up, then the reader is going to sense that. And I felt, well, I might as well just put it all out there. I mean, there's the hazing incident. There's the fact that I had this love affair, which ruined my first marriage. So those are hard things to reveal. But I think if you're going to be honest with the reader, you owe that to the reader.
Would you consider this a memoir?
Well, I think it's half a memoir, half a true crime story, which is interesting because from a point of view of someone trying to sell the book, they're saying, well, which shelf does it go on? Does it go on the memoir shelf or does it go on the true crime shelf? That can be both. That could be an asset, goes on both, or it's like, I don't know which one where it belongs.
So, was your business experience involved in any of those?
No, not at all. No, it was not.
But it was successful.
Very successful. We were just in the right place at the right time.
Wow.
When I started, I was literally the first employee of my boss who started the company. And when I left, we had 300 employees. So we were just lucky. And I was so inexperienced in the business world. I had been an academic that I didn't know how easily small businesses fail.
Oh,
so
sure.
we started this business, he and I and two other fellows, and it just went like gangbusters. And I was too dumb to know that it could have just as easily gone the opposite direction.
But of course, writing and publishing is kind of a business on its own, right? I mean, your experience of finding agents.
Finding agents is in some ways the hardest part. Well, no, I guess writing the book is the hardest part.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
So lots of people have written books that don't have agents. Finding an agent is a difficult task. And I only found I've had 3 agents, all very, very good people with whom I have had a good relationship. But it was hard finding each one of them. And in each case, when I found that agent, it was through somebody who already was working with that person who could vouch for me. And that's what led me to that point.
All right, so let's talk about a better ending. What as a writer would be the inciting incident of the story would be the death of your sister in mid-September 1974.
Right.
Right. Do you want to describe the scene at all?
Yeah, I was in graduate school in Philadelphia, at the University of Pennsylvania. That's where I got my PhD. And I was at a baseball game, and I thought I heard my name as a page on the public address system, but I ignored it. And
I think that was interesting in the book where the Jim Johnson.
Yeah.
PA.
I mean, I heard it, and it was like one of those things that sort of went in one ear and out the other, but not exactly. Yeah, that sounded like me, but that didn't happen again. And when I got home a couple of hours later, my wife, my first wife, heard me drive up to the house, came out, and told me that my sister Eileen was dead, and that she had shot herself. And I was just in total shock. Eileen was only 15 months younger than I, so we had grown up. I never knew when she wasn't around. She was always there. And we weren't close as little kids. We were always fighting when we were little children. But as teenagers, we got close. And but I hadn't seen her for 4 years. And I had talked to her occasionally on the phone. Phone calls were very expensive back in those days, but we wrote letters. And I did not know that she was depressed or having problems at all. So it was a complete and utter shock. What was also a shock was to find out that her husband, Vic, as I call him in the book, that isn't his real name, who was her high school sweetheart, was home at the time when she died. He was a cop. They'd been married for about 7 years. They had no children. And my first reaction was, well, how do we know he didn't do it if he was in the house? And my parents, who were very, very close to his mother and my mother were best friends, where they had met through their children. She said, well, you better talk to him, Jim. And I did. We sat down in the kitchen. He told me a long story, but basically it was Eileen was having an affair with her boss, and she shot herself in a fit of remorse.
Was her boss's name really Boring?
His real name was Harold Boring, except they called him Hal. Hal Boring. Yeah, that was his name. That was one of the few names that I didn't change in the book.
Yeah, that's pretty unique. Well, I mean, and you wrote in the book, and this goes to what you were saying about not making things up, but you have all of Vic's dialogue. I mean, did you really?
Well,
remember?
you know, I mean that's our artistic license. I mean, as I say in my author's note at the beginning, basically, you and a friend have an argument. The next day, you rehash it. The next day, and you say, "I said this." No, you didn't. You said that. You can't agree on it. 50 years ago, you just have to hope that you got the tenor, the rhythms of the conversation right. Otherwise, we wouldn't have memoirs. I mean, how could you ever hope to try to recreate that? Now, some people have said to me, "Oh, that was too much artistic license." I don't know what to say.
Well, I think one of the things about this book is the mix of your storytelling capabilities, your memoir writing, you know, and the analysis of what happened. And it, you know, you've told a great story.
Thank you.
And it's just, you know, that scene is really something. Imagining. I mean, Vic said that it, at that point, right, that it was the pistol that they kept in a box, unloaded on a top shelf.
Well, I don't know if they kept it. He said it was unloaded, but supposedly it was in the house for her protection.
Right.
So if it was in the house for her protection, why was it unloaded? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense, which is why ultimately the investigation became quite interesting down the road.
Yeah, do you want to describe any of the investigation?
I mean, you know, basically what happened was I took Eileen's death and I just put it aside, and that was it. It was over. It was done with. But around in the year 2000, 2001, I was shopping for a story to write a novel about. And I thought, well, maybe I can write about Eileen, but it's just a sad story. And just a sad story isn't enough to be a novel. You need tension and you need
Right.
other elements. So I said, well, I'll change Eileen's story. I will make it so. Basically what happened in real life is my parents said, talk to Vic. I talked to Vic. I believed him. They believed him. That was the end of it. There was no more story. But I thought, well, what would happen if there were a character like myself who was asked by his parents to make this choice, but one parent thought it was a murder and the other thought it was a suicide? That would be really interesting, because the protagonist has to choose, and then later he goes back and looks at it, at his parents are passed away, as my parents had, and he says, you know, did I really choose the truth, or did I choose between my parents? I liked my father a lot more than my mother. I mean, that in the character, that wasn't true in real life, but you know, the character says, well, I like my father. My mother was not, and she thought it was murder. He thought it was suicide. So I went with him. I showed her. But was that really the truth? So I was writing, and it was going along really well. And one day I was riding my bicycle, and I was in Puerto Rico at the time, and I was thinking, well, how do my character what's he gonna do? How does he gonna find the police reports? Do they even exist? How do you get them? Where do you get them? You know,
Right.
I mean, can you just call up the police department? They'll give them to you? I don't know. And I thought, you know, that's really interesting. And I went home and I said to my wife, you know, I've been thinking about my character and how he gets this stuff, and I was thinking maybe it isn't the character, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one who needs this information. And she very kindly didn't say, well, duh. She said, yeah, Jim, this is your story. It isn't that fictional character's story. Well, I called a private detective in L.A., which I thought was kind of fun because Raymond Chandler's protagonist is an L.A. detective. I didn't want to go to San Bernardino, where my sister had lived, because I knew a lot of ex-cops were private investigators, and I didn't want to stir up any of those waters. And I found a fellow named Darrell Carlson, to whom, along with my children, the book is dedicated. And we wound up, through just an amazing coincidence, finding a woman who knew somebody in the coroner's office. And she said, I'll get you, it's called the autopsy protocol, what the coroner said about the death. She got the papers, but attached to the papers were the police reports. A whole set of police reports with no names redacted. Everything was right there. And what we found out was that Vic had threatened Eileen's life a week before she died, that he had beaten her up, and the line that sort of just made everything bubble up was when the police are interviewing him, they say, did your wife ever attempt suicide before? And the police report said, respondent said yes, and this is a quote, this was on an occasion when he tore her clothes off, slapped her, and beat her, and called her a whore. At that point, all bets were off. Now we had a different story. And I spent the next 2.5 years clandestinely investigating this. Why clandestinely with Darrell? Because I didn't trust the San Bernardino Police Department. Sure. It looked like San Bernardino Sheriff's Department. There's a difference between the police department and the Sheriff's Department. Vic was a San Bernardino police officer, but the crime happened so that the Sheriff's Office was the investigation. It looked like a complete cover-up. It was just it took me, as I say, about 2.5 years to finally go to the police and go to the sheriff and say, look, there's something amiss here.
So then you went out to dinner toward the end of the book. with Vic.
Yeah,
finally.
I don't. I hope readers. I'll keep that away from
Okay.
from the readers. But yes, the book does end with a dinner between
Yeah.
Darrow and myself and Vic and his third wife.
It's fascinating. And it really amazed me. One of the things that you mentioned in there was that 2-year-old boy in the house apparently while this.
Well, it's
Incident
interesting that you bring this up. From a writer's point of view, okay, I have this prologue, and in the prologue it sets up the fact that I'm about to go into dinner with Vic, and that I have found these reports and these things that I enumerated just a few minutes ago about, he beat her up and he threatened her life and so on. But I withheld that particular fact. Eileen was babysitting a 2-year-old boy who was in the house when the shot was fired. That, in just about everybody's book, it said, now wait a minute. This is a woman who desperately wanted to be a mother, who'd had several miscarriages. Right. She's going to kill herself in front of a child. We still do not, to this day, know what room the boy was in. We know that he was there. We know that social services came and took him away. That created a kind of gotcha that just made Vic's story not add up. And what's important to know is that when Vic told me the story originally, the 2-year-old wasn't in, and this was only a few days, it was 48 hours after Eileen died. So it wasn't like he could have forgotten the little boy that quickly. Right. That was in some ways the most seminal piece of information that we had that pointed to something that was far more complicated than she just shot herself in a fit of remorse.
Yeah, I mean, I would have still, that's what I wanted to ask you about too, is when you called it the better ending, was it a better ending for you, or do you think it's a better ending for the...
It's interesting. I came up with that title after I first wrote the book because I wanted a better ending.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I wanted a better ending. And it's funny because a number of people said, well, this isn't really a better ending. And my wife and I were talking about it, and I said, well, why don't, my agent had sold the book, and I said, well, why don't we, Elizabeth, my wife said, well, why don't we call it In Search of a Better Ending? So I called up my editor and I said, why don't you change the title to In Search of a Better Ending? And they said, sorry, pal, we bought the book. We get to choose the title. We chose it because we liked the better ending. That's the title. Then they went, A Brother's 20-Year Quest to uncover the truth about his sister's death. I wanted A Brother's Quest for Truth. Once again, I lost that argument. It finds out when you wind up being lucky enough, as I was, to get a book published by Simon & Schuster. Once they get a hold of it, things change. So I had written this book and first finished it in 2005. And while I was searching for an agent, one very, very famous agent said that he couldn't take it because it was too sprawling. And I said, well, let's unsprawl it. Recommend a private editor and we'll unsprawl it. He did, and a wonderful editor by the name of Laura Zigman, who lives in Cambridge and is a wonderful novelist herself. She took it from 103,000 words down to 90,000. And then we took it back to that agent. The agent said, nah.
So, but anyhow, then I found an agent who took it on, and she said, Jim, before we send this out, I'll have to do some editing. So she took it down to 89,000, and then Simon & Schuster bought it, and they took it down to 87,000. And I was talking to my editor one day, and I said, 2 more editors, and this is going to be a great short story.
Well,
Each editing, I must say, really improved the book.
before we end this up, tell me a little bit about the book you're working on now.
The book I'm working on now is called The Last Honest Man, and it's about a widower who is estranged from his daughter, who is a hooker and a drug addict. And he lives in Philadelphia, and his boss asked him to go up to Boston to do some research on a Oriental rug store that his boss has inherited from an old Army buddy. And the good thing about this story is there's not an autobiographical detail in there. My two lovely daughters are not hookers or drug addicts. They're both filmmakers, and so it's been fun. I've been digging in. It's written from multiple points of view, and a lot of fun.
Okay. So, well, if you have enjoyed this video and would like to see more, you'll find them through links on our website, capecodwritercenter.org, through our Facebook page, and on YouTube. And I'd love to have another couple of hours to talk with you about all this
me
stuff.
too. Yeah, I have a Facebook page. I'm not very good on social media, but it's jameswhitfieldthompson.com, where you can find stuff out, or
Well, you can find out almost anything.
yeah, you can find out almost anything on the internet. That's absolutely true.
Okay.
All right.
So thank you for watching Books in the World.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.